Okay, good afternoon, students. First, let me know if you can hear the audio, if you can see the video and hear the audio. Okay, so I will take up some questions that I received yesterday before we proceed to what we left yesterday. One question is, while proving the inconsistency of Maxwell equation, why did you take two different movement of the mirror? So actually, you are talking about why we are looking at the movement from beam splitter to the mirror M1 in the vertical direction and the beam splitter to the mirror M2 in the horizontal direction. Actually, in the case of Michelson interferometer, it is a two-beam interference phenomenon. So you need two beam derived from one single beam. So the single beam is the beam that is incident on the beam splitter. Then it is split into two parts by the half silvered mirror. One part goes above and one part goes to the right, and when they are reflected back, they interfere and they maintain a constancy in phase difference. That is called mutual coherence. So the two beam need to maintain a mutual coherence. So you need at least two beam to produce the interference phenomenon. So that is why we need two different directions. Of course, it need not be vertically upward. And the two direction need not be at right angle in principle, but the effect of the motion of the frame will be observed more if the two directions are perpendicular to one another. Then here is a question, if we do the calculation of the time dilation in such a way that the mirror is vertical and the light source is placed at the wall rather than the floor of the train, in that case, won't it be different? So the question is, if in the time dilation thought experiment, the laser beam was going from floor to the roof and then from roof to the floor. Instead of that, if the light beam starts from one side of the wall and the mirror is on the other side of the wall, and we do everything in the same manner, will it be different? The answer is it will not be different. We could have done that also. In that case, that particular location where the mirror is placed, that mirror will be moving with the speed of the train with respect to the observer who is at rest. So in the direction of motion, again, we would have observed the same phenomenon that we observed in the thought experiment we showed yesterday. How was STR proved? Which are the experiment which proves special theory of relativity? Now, the second postulate or the most important postulate of the special theory of relativity, that is the speed of light in vacuum is c in all directions irrespective of and in all inertial frames. This was in fact proved by Michelson and Morley experiment. Or in other way around, it is the outcome of the Michelson and Morley experiment that encouraged Einstein to come up with his special theory of relativity. But of course, there are other experiments. Some of the experiments we'll discuss today. These experiments are also validating the postulates of the special theory of relativity. Please explain the bending of light in ether due to drag theory. So in ether drag theory, it was assumed or it was imagined that the ether medium is also dragged by earth. So at least in some part of the ether, some part of the ether which is surrounding earth is also moving with earth. In rest, ether is at rest. So if you consider light coming from a star, initially it is coming from the ether medium which is at rest and it is traveling with the velocity c. But as soon as it enters the influence of earth, still light is traveling in ether, but that ether medium is also traveling according to that hypothesis. So if the ether medium is also traveling, in that traveling ether medium, light need to travel again with the speed c. But now, near Earth, the ether medium is having a velocity component v. So you have a velocity component v and that c with respect to that moving ether frame. Now what that ether frame near star, what it will feel? It will feel that the light is getting bent because of this additional component due to the velocity of the ether. So this is the reason why light should get bent and which was not experimentally observed. Is there any proof for the second postulate of STR? Of course. In fact, there are many experiments. The first experiment that proves the second postulate of ether is the Michelson-Morley experiment. And there will be many other experiments. Some of the experiments we will discuss. Is time dilation confirmed by experiment or it is hypothetical? Time dilation is very much experimental. It is not hypothetical. Okay, so if you have more questions, we can take those on Saturday. But what we were discussing in the previous class, we were deriving the expression of time dilation. So we were considering that there is a frame of reference S prime, which is moving with a velocity v with respect to the rest frame, which is S. And this S prime frame can be a train which is moving with a constant velocity v. And then there are two events taking place. The first event is the emission of a light pulse located at the floor of the train. And then obviously the light pulse will travel, some light will travel in the vertically upward direction, and after reflection from the mirror, it will come back and arrive at the floor again. And let us say there is a detector at the floor and that detector will give an impulse when it receives the light. So it is the switching on of the source or sending the beam from the floor and arrival of the beam at the floor. So these are the two events. And if according to the observer in S prime frame, delta t prime is the time interval, and the same events is observed as delta t, then what we can see is that delta t equal to delta t prime multiplied by one minus square root 1 minus 1 upon square root 1 minus v square upon c square. So this we derive in the previous class. So we calculated what is the time taken from the floor to the roof, back to the floor in the frame of reference S prime. We find that that is 2h by c. We are calling 2h by c as delta t prime. And we also measure the same interval from the rest frame, and we have found that that is 2h by c upon square root of 1 minus v square by c square. So basically delta t equal to delta t prime into 1 upon square root 1 minus v square by c square. So here v by c is normally defined as beta, and this particular term 1 minus v square by c square is normally denoted as by the variable gamma. So these are beta and gamma. Now what you will see that this gives the relation between the interval as measured in the moving frame in the rest frame. So if delta t is the time interval as observed from rest frame and delta t prime is the same interval as observed in the moving frame, then these two are related according to this particular expression. But here we assumed that the two events, the interval is separated by two events, and the two events are simply switching on of a light beam and the arrival of a light beam. But can the two events be some arbitrary event? For example, can the two event be the clapping by the observer at two instants of time? So for example, the observer claps and the clock starts, the observer claps again and the clock stops. And according to S prime, that interval is del T prime. But can the same derivation apply in that case? The answer is, we can always think of a roof. We can always think of a mirror placed at a particular height h. We can always choose h, so that for any two interval, we will have delta T prime equal to 2h by c, because h can be in principle at our disposal. So even though the two events can be arbitrary event, but what we can do, when the person claps first, we will switch on the laser and then we will adjust the height of the mirror in such a way that the light will arrive on the floor again when the person will clap the second time. So that way, the interval can be made equal to the starting point of the light beam and arrival of the light beam. So even though this is derived for a particular phenomenon, it will apply for any arbitrary time interval. The other important point is where this event is taking place. The location for the event is a particular point in the frame S prime, and both the events are taking place at the same location. Now, if in a given frame, if two events are taking place at the same location, then the interval as measured in that particular frame is called proper time. So in the S prime frame, in S prime, two events are taking place at the same location, at a point which is at rest with respect to S prime. So the two events are taking place at a location, and that location or that point where the two events are taking place is at rest in that particular frame. In that case, the time interval delta T prime is called proper time. And in that case, we can denote it as delta T naught. So when we measure the time interval, if the time interval is between two events which is taking place at the same location which is at rest with respect to that particular frame, then the time interval from that particular frame of reference will be called as proper time. So delta T prime in this case is the proper time. So delta T, which is from the other frame, that is the frame S, is given as delta T equal to delta T naught into gamma into delta T naught. Now we will look at the property of gamma. So as you can see, if V equal to 0, then the denominator will be equal to 1. So gamma is equal to 1. If V equal to 0, that is S prime is at rest with respect to S, then gamma is equal to 1. So in that case, delta t equal to delta t naught. So the two events will be observed to be happening with the same interval, whether you look at from S prime frame or S frame. But if, let's say, V is non-zero and V is less than C, if V is non-zero and V is less than C, then you will see that this number is less than 1. The denominator will be less than 1. So gamma will be then greater than 1. If gamma is greater than 1, then delta t is greater than delta t naught. So if the observer in S prime observes that the two events are happening at a certain time interval according to his clock, the observer in S frame will feel that the two events are taking place at a larger time interval. You can also say that according to the observer in S frame, the clock in the S prime frame is running slow. And that is why it needs to be multiplied by a factor gamma, which is greater than 1, so that the two becomes equal. So the clock in a moving frame with velocity v, which is less than c, appears to run slowly. And this particular phenomenon, that delta is greater than delta t naught, is the phenomenon called time dilation. The other observation from the same expression is, now you know that we have, let me see, let me write down again. This is the expression. Now we know that gamma expression is here, but what will happen when V is equal to C? If V is equal to C, then you will see C upon C is equal to 1, so this will be 0, and in that case, delta t, this will be infinity, so delta t will be infinity. That is number one. And what will happen if V is greater than C? If V is greater than C, this is greater than 1. So 1 minus something greater than 1 will give me a negative number. Square root of a negative number is an imaginary number. So your delta t will be an imaginary number. Now both these situations, in one case, two events have taken place in frame S prime. But in frame S, since the interval is coming out to be infinity, the observer in S frame will feel that the two events do not take place. Only one event took place, the second event did not take place. And in the second case, when V is greater than C, delta t, which is supposed to be a positive number, a positive real number, because time has to be a positive real number. Now, an imaginary time has no meaning. So both these situations are impossible. Both these two situations are physically not possible. Impossible means physically not possible. So the implication is that any physical system cannot move at a speed equal to or greater than the speed of light. Any physical system or body cannot move at speed equal, I need to wipe this part, equal to or greater than C. So in other words, C is the upper limit of speed for any physical system. Because you cannot have a situation where V will be equal to C or V will be greater than C. So this puts the limit that why, according to this particular derivation, that any physical system cannot move at the speed of light or greater than the speed of light. Now this particular time dilation, for this particular time dilation, we consider that the event is taking place in the S prime frame. So the event is taking place in the moving frame. And proper time, again, you need to remember that in order to see that which interval is proper time, there will be many time interval as measured by different frames of reference. But which time interval you will consider to be the proper time? For that, you have to see that with respect to which frame the event is taking place at the same location. So only with respect to that particular frame, you have to, only using the time interval of that particular frame, you have to define the proper time. So for the moving frame, event is taking place on the moving frame. So the time interval as measured by S prime is the proper time. And you have the relation that in the other frame, in the rest frame, the observed time is equal to gamma into the proper time. Now assume that the event is taking place in the S frame, in the rest frame, and you are observing the interval from S prime frame. In that case, what will be the relation? If the phenomenon is the other way around, if the two events take place in S, then the interval, then you know that delta t will be delta t naught. Delta t, the interval between the two events as observed in frame S, will be the proper time. So delta t will be then delta t naught. But we can perform the same derivation again. We can carry out the same derivation again. Now you will see this frame which is moving. Now instead of that, the observer in S prime frame will feel that S is moving in the opposite direction. So it will be moving with a velocity minus v. But whatever we see that instead of, if there is a roof here where a mirror is there, that roof will be traveling with a velocity minus v, that is from right to left. But other than that, every other aspects of the derivation will be remaining same. And then we will see that delta t prime is equal to gamma delta t naught. So if we see that the event is taking place in the moving frame, then delta t from S frame is equal to gamma into delta t naught. If the two events are taking place in the S frame and we are observing from the moving frame, then delta t prime, which is the time interval from the moving frame, is written as gamma into delta t naught, or it can be derived as like this. So you can see that you can write down the expression of time dilation either from the S prime frame or from the S frame. But these are all derivations from the thought experiment. Why it need to be the thought experiment? Because light is traveling at a tremendous speed, and to start a clock when the light starts and to stop the clock when light will be coming back after reflection, this will be taking place at such a small amount of time. That small amount of time, it will be almost impossible to measure experimentally. So still our technology is not that developed that we will be able to record such a small time interval. So that is why these experiments are thought experiment. So in principle, they should be correct, but we still do not have the technical means to do that. But still there are experimental evidence. The first experiment that verifies the time dilation, that validates the time dilation, was performed in 1941 by two scientists called Rossi, just let me verify, Rossi and Hall. So what they did, they look at some elementary particle called muon, which are created in the upper atmosphere. So let's say this is the upper atmosphere. Upper atmosphere. So what happens in upper atmosphere? We have got various atoms, and then from outside world, some rays called cosmic ray. Some ray called cosmic ray interact with these atoms. And when these cosmic ray interact with these atoms, some fundamental particle called muons are created. Muons are created. These muons are unstable particle. Unstable means they will be remaining as muon for a certain amount of time only. After that, they changes their form. They take some other form. Now, out of, let us say, 1000 muons, the time taken by half of the muon to change their form, to go to some other form, is called half-life. Half-life, and it is denoted as T half. It is the time taken to decay, by 50% of the population. So as I said, let's say there are 1000 muons at a given point of time. Now, after their half-life, it is a certain amount of time that we are calling as half-life. So after their half-life, some 500 muons will only be present. The other muons have gone to some other form. So if we know that how many muons are present then we can calculate the half-life. Or if we know the half-life, after a certain amount of time, how many muons will be present, that also we can calculate. Now this half-life in the case of muon is found to be T half for muon, T half for muon from the frame of reference of muon with respect to muon frame. Or if the muon is at rest and we are performing the experiment on Earth and the muons are at rest, then we will see that the half-life of muon is 1.5 microsecond. So after 1.5 microsecond, 1000 muons will decay and there will be 500 muons remaining. But the muons which are created in the upper atmosphere are also traveling at a speed comparable to the speed of light, that is about 0.8 c. So what Rossi and Hall did, they figured out, they separated muons according to their speed. So they separated muons with a particular speed and then they find out how many muons, how many of those muons will be arriving on the surface of Earth. And how many will be arriving on the surface of Earth will be depending on what is the time that muon will take to travel from the upper atmosphere to the ground. If the time taken is smaller, if the time taken is larger than the half-life, then more number of muons will be available. So suppose the time taken by muon to travel from upper atmosphere to the ground is exactly the half-life, then 50% of the muons which are available in the upper atmosphere will be found on the ground. So they made this measurement, and from that measurement, they calculated what is the half-life of muon, and the observed half-life is found to be 2.5 microsecond. Observe T by 2 is found to be 2.5 microsecond. So according to muon, its half-life is 1.5, but according to the observation made from Earth, its half-life is 2.5 microsecond. This will be only possible if you consider the effect of V. You can use this V to calculate gamma. Gamma will come out to be 1.67, and you will see that if the proper time is 1.5 microsecond, 1.5 microsecond multiplied by 1.67 will be equal to 2.5 microsecond, which is the observed half-life of muon. So that way, Rossi and Hall in a way verified that the observation of time dilation is correct, that the postulates and the derivation leading to the time dilation is correct. But there are additional experiments done, and another experiment was in fact done in the year 1971. There was another experiment performed in 1971 that was in US Naval Laboratory. So what was done in 1971 in the US Naval Laboratory, they took 4 numbers of atomic clocks. 4 numbers of atomic clocks. Now, the property of the atomic clock is that they can give a very precise time. Now, these atomic clocks were placed on a jet, placed on a jet plane. And prior to placing the atomic clock in the Z plane, they were synchronized with a ground-based clock. They were synchronized with a ground-based clock. And then these Z planes were moved, they traveled, the Z planes traveled, the Z traveled around the Earth. So you can see, even though the Z needs to take off and the Z needs to land, other than that, the Z will be mostly traveling with a constant velocity. So we can find out, one can find out what is the velocity of the Z, and thereby one can calculate what is the gamma factor. And using that gamma factor, you can find out that what will be the interval, what will be the time interval of the ground-based clock with reference to the time interval in the clock stationed in the Z plane. Now, since there is a difference between the time interval as measured by the ground-based clock and as measured by the Z plane. So there is a difference, and due to this difference, there will be a time lag. There will be a time lag between the two clocks. So when the Z planes arrived at the US naval base, they have found that the two clocks are giving different time. Now you know that the clock in the Z plane will be moving slow. So they will give a number representing the time that will be smaller than the number given by the ground-based clock. And it was found that time lag, the observed time lag was 273 plus minus 7 nanosecond plus minus 7 nanosecond. This was observed. And if you use the speed of the Z plane to calculate according to the time dilation expression, then you will find that the expression is, the value is 275 plus minus 21 nanosecond. So this is the predicted value. This is the predicted value. So the time dilation experiment, theoretically, it is predicted that there will be a lag of 275 nanosecond, and the observed lag is 273 nanosecond. And if you see the relative error will be about 2 divided by 275. 2 upon 275 in any standard is a very good accuracy. So the predicted value or the theoretical value and the experimental value are in a very good agreement. So this is another experiment that proves that time dilation, whatever experiment we have derived from the postulates of the special theory of relativity, are correct. And it is not only validating the correctness of the time dilation experiment, it is also validating the postulates of special theory of relativity, that is, the speed of light is constant in all directions and in all inertial frames. So these all experiments are in fact indirectly validating the postulates of the special theory of relativity. Now, after time dilation, there is another observation, there is another derivation that is called length contraction. length contraction. So we are already convinced about the time dilation, and we also know that time dilation experiment is valid. It has been verified by experiment. Now we will use the expression of time dilation to make some further observation. And let us consider again that there is a moving frame S prime, which is nothing but the frame of reference of a train moving with a constant velocity v. Let me consider that this is the train. F is the front side of the train and B is the back side of the train. And one can measure the length. Now we already know that time is no longer universal. According to the expression of time dilation, the two clocks, one stationed at S and one stationed at S prime, they may not give the same time. So whatever was the assumption of the classical mechanics that time is universal is no longer valid in relativistic mechanics. In a similar manner, let us consider also generalize that the length is also dependent on the frame of reference. So if the observer in S prime measures the length, according to S prime measures the length as L. So according to the observer in S prime, the length of the train, that is the distance between B and F, is L prime, and S, which is the other inertial frame, measures the length as L. Now we'll see what is the difference between them, or if there is any difference. So remember, frame S prime is nothing but the train itself. So there is axis attached to the train, which is moving with a speed v, and then you have the rest frame S. Now let me consider that on the S prime frame there is this location O. You have a location O where there is an observer. So at O, there is an observer in the S frame. O is the location of an observer. Now, let us consider that S prime frame has got two observers, one at the front of the train and the other is the second observer is the back side of the train. And they try to find out what is the time taken when F crosses the observer and when B crosses the observer. So again, we are considering two events. There are two events, that is when B crosses O and when first F will cross O. So when F crosses O and when B crosses O. When B crosses O. So these are the two events, and these two events can be observed either from S prime or S frame. And from both frames, they can find out what is the time interval. Now, from the frame S prime, they can start the clock when F will cross the point O, and they will stop the clock when B will cross the point O. Similarly, the observer who is at rest in the frame S will also start the clock when F will cross the point O, and he will stop the clock when B will cross the point O. So the two events are separated by interval delta t. This is the interval for S, and delta t prime is the interval for S prime. Now you see that delta t prime, which is the interval as per the observer in the S prime frame or in the moving frame, and delta t prime has to be equal to length divided by the speed of the train, that is L prime divided by V. Similarly, the time interval as measured by the observer at O, according to him, the length of the train is L, which is moving with a velocity V. Remember, you may notice that I am using V with respect to S prime frame as well as with respect to S frame. That is because according to the observer at rest, the train is moving with plus V, and according to the train, S frame is moving with a speed minus V. But if you have to find out the time, the magnitude in both cases is V. So distance divided by the speed, which is V, has to be the speed which is to be used to find out the time has to be the same. So that way, because the relative speed, whether we are considering from S or we are considering from S prime, the relative speed is same. So that is why I am using the same value of V in both the expressions. So what we can do now, we can use these two equations. From here you see V equal to L prime by delta T prime, and from here V equal to L by delta T. So I can write L by delta T equal to L prime upon delta T prime. So this gives me L equal to delta T upon delta T prime into L prime. Now you have to be again careful to choose the proper time. I define proper time as the time interval from a frame of reference in which frame of reference the two events are taking place at the same location. So now you see that the two events are the time when F crosses O and the time when B crosses O. Now the location where these two events are happening is O, which is at rest with respect to S frame. So in this case, delta T is the proper time. So delta T in this case is delta T naught. So if delta T is equal to delta T naught, then the same interval as measured by the moving frame will be delta T prime equal to gamma into delta T naught. So this way you will get that delta T naught, this way you will get that delta T, which is nothing but delta T naught, delta T upon delta T prime is equal to gamma delta T upon delta T upon delta is 1 by gamma. Delta T upon delta T naught, this is equal to 1 by gamma. Then we should also be concerned about which length is the proper length. We can use similar definition, just like to find out the interval, we have to see with respect to which frame the location is at rest. Now, to make the measurement of length, we have to see with respect to which frame the length is at rest. So the length of the train is at rest with respect to the S prime frame. So L prime must be the proper length. That is the length that is at rest with respect to the frame. So we can write L prime equal to L naught. And in that case, you can use this expression and you will see L is equal to L naught upon gamma. L is equal to L naught upon gamma. We already know that if V is not equal to 0, then gamma is greater than 1. So in that case, if gamma is greater than 1, then you will see that L is less than L naught, because you are dividing it by a number greater than 1. So L will be less than L naught. So the observed length from S of a moving train will be smaller. So a moving object appears to contract along the direction of relative motion. This is also another important point, that all this time dilation or length contraction, we need to be careful regarding the direction, especially in the length contraction. We need to be careful that the length contraction is taking place only along the direction of relative motion. For example, the train may have a height h. So if the train is having a height h, doesn't matter whether you are making the observation from the S prime frame or S frame, the height is not going to change, because everything is coming. If you look at our time dilation derivation, there the mirror was moving. The mirror was moving in the direction of motion. So only because of that motion, whatever discrepancy we have observed. Now we are using the expression of time dilation in order to derive this particular expression. So this particular expression is going to be happening only along the direction of relative motion. And this particular phenomenon, that length of a moving body appears to contract, is known as length contraction. This is known as length contraction. But we need to appreciate, or we need to understand, that when we are making the observation from S frame, any length which is moving appears to become short. But in a similar manner, if the observer in S prime frame makes a measurement of length which is at rest in S frame, equally that length will also appear to be shorter for the observer who is in S prime frame. So it can be either way around. I think I'm not going to discuss any further points as far as classes are concerned. I have 2-3 minutes left. I can just look at your comments, and if I have time, I'll try to answer some of them. See, some of you are telling me to use the whiteboard. I can, of course, go to the whiteboard if majority of you feel that I should go to the whiteboard. But so far, from the feedback I am seeing, majority of you are liking it. But if you think that there is a specific problem with the green board, one problem can be, of course, the data, or you are finding the letter bit small. I can try to write it even bit bigger. But the point of not using the whiteboard is that slowly the derivation will become bigger. And if I use the whiteboard, I'll have to keep rubbing again and again. So that is the one important point why I'm not using the whiteboard. But again, if you think that whiteboard is more effective or more useful, then I can go back to the whiteboard. Another question, please explain proper length. What is proper length? Proper length is, for example, there is, let's say there is a particular length, maybe the length of a table. Now, what I can do, I can sit on the table and I can make a measurement of the table. So even though the table is moving, whatever my measurement will be with respect to the table. So if I make measurement of length of an object from a frame which is at rest with respect to the object, or if I make the measurement of length of a body in a frame in which the body is at rest. So the body needs to be at rest in that frame. And if I make measurement in that frame, that length will be called as proper length. But if I am making measurement of length of a body, but my platform is moving, then my length will not be called. My measurement, the length I measure, will not be called as proper length. How will you decide which is proper time? This is a very important question. So you have to see that when you are considering proper time, it is basically you are looking at the time interval between two events. Now these two events must take place at one location which will be at rest in some frame. So you have to find out the frame of reference in which the event is taking place at the same location. Now, once you find out in which frame the two events are taking place at the same location, in that frame, whatever is the time interval, that time interval will be the proper time. In time dilation, why you don't consider S to be moving with minus V as we did in length contraction? Of course, I said that if we make observation from S prime frame, then S will be moving with a speed minus V. I can proceed in same manner. So in that case, S will be moving with a speed minus V, that is in this direction. Now, if there is a light beam, which in the rest frame, it will be going like this and like this. But for this particular frame, the mirror will be moving. Initially, it was here, then it will be here. So light will be traveling a path something like this, according to the S prime frame. So you can do exactly the same derivation. It doesn't matter it is going from left to right, but these triangles are same, and you can find out what is this time according to the second postulates. This length will be same. This distance will still be, if this time is, let's say, t, then this distance will be v of t. So that way you can obtain exactly the same expressions, but with an outcome that delta t prime equal to gamma delta t naught. So I just did not do because it is almost exactly the same way. How is F crossing the point O first? F crossing the point O first, because I think probably the confusion is coming, because you may think that the train has already crossed the point O. I mean, this I showed, just think that the train is at some random location. We do not know where it is, and its front side is F and the back side is B, and it is coming from left to right. So it will be crossing, F will be crossing O first and then B. So that is what I'm saying. Let's say it is coming from left to right, but this is how the train will look like. The front is F, the back is B. Okay, I think we have time for that much only. We'll stop here. I will look at your questions, and you can definitely ask more questions when we'll have our discussion session, most probably on Saturday.